This is the Ted Wallachin Podcast. Brought to you by Halenda's, the meat people. Enjoy their award-winning products at selected Metro, Sobeys, Fortinos, and Foodland locations. Halenda's, the way sausage should taste. And Tom's Place. For the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices, it's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. And now, here's Ted Wallachin.
I was taught as a young boy that eating an apple a day, remember that? Eat an apple a day keeps the doctor away. That tasty, nutritious fruit kept all that was unhealthy at bay, thus keeping, of course, said doctor away. Back then, the apple would fall into what we now call a superfood, but there were no superfoods, not that I know of back then. So the questions pop into my mind are, A, what qualifies as a superfood, and who are these people that are making this designation? To answer this and, well, virtually every question you may have, my friend, registered nutritionist, author of the best-selling book, Sprout Right Family Food, and the host of the podcast, Eat This with Lianne Phillipson. Lianne Phillipson, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. It's so good to talk to you, Ted.
Nice to talk to you. Please tell me that apples are still considered a superfood.
I don't know that they actually make the top whatever list of superfoods. I would definitely classify them as a fast food, a healthy fast food with all the fiber and great taste that's going on there. But it really, interestingly enough, lacks the typical color and over-the-top kind of nutrients that I think is what really is behind a superfood.
So do we really don't even know what the definition of a superfood is, do we?
Well, I mean, you can Google it and find a whole bunch of different perspectives of it, but really a superfood in my mind is a food that does offer more than others. So let's take the apple that you've been talking about versus a blueberry or a blackberry or a cherry. Deep, rich colors of these foods actually offer plant nutrients, probably ones that don't even have a name yet, but there are anthocyanins, let's say, is one of the ingredients that are in what are called these superfoods because of these colors. And they offer even more nutrition than, let's say, your apple or your banana. It seems that a lot of the foods that are rich in deep colors, so even beets, for instance, I would classify that more as a superfood because of the incredible health benefits that it has, especially for men, and nitric oxide. I just talked about this in the latest episode of Eat This with Lianne about men's health. That was episode 79. So that's a really important one for you gents out there to listen to about why beets are a superfood in particular for you. But also there's all these others. So all the berries and then the deep greens. You hear like eat your greens every day. So that's the kale, the collards, broccoli even falls into that versus your iceberg lettuce type thing. So the iceberg lettuce, if you look at it, is less there. There's less intensity in that color.
Right.
So the more colors you have, the more it's going to be called typically a superfood, or that there's just extra nutrients in it that are going to provide more for your body.
What about quinoa? What makes quinoa such a superfood? What does it do for me that makes it so super?
So the quinoa is actually
other than the fact that I can spell it.
Yes, exactly. A lot of people say quinoa. They don't really know how to pronounce it is more the problem. But quinoa is a superfood because it has as much protein. It's a plant, obviously. It's actually botanically a seed. It's not actually a grain like rice is. And quinoa is a superfood because it's a complex protein. So it really rivals an egg in terms of the amino acids, which are basically the building blocks or bricks of a protein. And quinoa is a superfood because it's a plant-based, full complement of a protein food. So whether you're someone who is looking for alternatives to meat and eggs and wanting a complete protein, then that's definitely one that you can go for. Whereas opposed to, say, rice, even brown rice, does not have a full complement of the amino acids that we need every day.
Speaking to nutritionist Lianne Phillipson, we're talking about superfoods. Let's talk about all those foods that belong to what's called the allium family, A-L-L-I-U-M, the chives, leeks, garlic, etc.
Yeah, so these guys really, when it comes to garlic and onions, those actually are what are called sulfur-containing foods. So sulfur-containing amino acids, which are very specific for helping your body to detoxify. Now, there are a lot of people out there that just can't literally stomach onions and garlic because they don't feel great. That's a different situation. But when you add in garlic, for instance, that's incredible for your immune system. And then when you've got onions to back those up, not only does it make your food absolutely like 100% more tasty when you add those into anything that you're making, but also it helps your liver and its detoxification. So it's really when your body's getting so much more. And then, of course, there's all the fats that you can get from things like salmon, which are more omega-3 heavy, to avocados, which are more neutral, like your olive oil. So the monounsaturated fats, but really important part of the Mediterranean diet. And then all the nuts that you can get. So peanuts are probably at the bottom of the list in sort of terms of superfoods, but something like Brazil nuts and walnuts are really high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are really important for every single cell in your body.
Now, you're going to think I'm just goofing with you when I ask you this question, but I'm not. But are there any alcohols that fall into the superfood category? Like, for example, red wine, is that a superfood?
Yeah, so no, you're not crazy on this front. So if you think about red wine versus white wine, yeah, absolutely. So there's a group of nutrients, or something called resveratrol, which is what comes from really those dark grapes. So again, back to what I said off the top, which is more about these berries, blueberries, blackberries, the intensity of color. So you've got green grapes, so white wine. It's like an okay color. I would throw that into like the apple category. But when you have the purple and the red grapes that you are using to make wine, then again, that intensity of color offers different antioxidants. And basically, it's the antioxidants that really help to keep your cell structure strong because of what's called free radical damage from all sorts of things, from smoking to sunshine to even just stress and pollution, everything that's out there. Even if we lived in a perfect bubble, then we'd still have free radicals roaming around in our body. And it's these antioxidants that basically help to put out what I call that fire. So these are so important for every aspect of health, from aging to your energy to cancer, heart disease, diabetes, everything from a cellular level onwards.
Her podcast is called Eat This with Lianne. She is nutritionist Lianne Phillipson. It seems to me there have been, quote, superfoods over the years that are no longer considered, at least by some, as superfoods. And I'm thinking, is it pronounced acai, A-K-A-I?
Acai.
Acai, is that the way it's pronounced?
Acai. Well, I don't think it's ever going to go out of fashion because the acai berry, when you look at it, it has that color. So whether it's more fashionable or it's kind of the latest craze, like, cauliflower for a little while was the biggest craze of, you have cauliflower rice, and then, now we have a cauliflower pizza. So I think the acai, it'll never go out of fashion from a superfood standpoint, but in terms of, this one's new, just a little bit like goji berries years ago, where I thought, yes, I have to eat the goji berries. Well, if you think about a goji berry, it's that red, that deep intensity red color again. So even whether they're classified as a superfood or not, there's also the other sort of side of the coin, which is whether it's in fashion or whether it's the latest trend, because we always have different food trends that come along. But where does that come from? Mm-hmm. When you look at a superfood, it's going to have some sort of color, or like quinoa have an extra something that maybe rice doesn't, or millet doesn't, or a different grain like that.
Now, some superfoods are more potent when they're eaten raw versus cooked. How are we supposed to tell which is the best way to consume them?
So sometimes it can come down to taste. So let's take tomatoes, for instance, and lycopene, which is an antioxidant that's found in tomatoes, especially important for prostate health.
That's tomato, the fruit or the vegetable tomato?
It's a fruit, yes, because it's got seeds in it. So, does it matter? No, it doesn't. Just eat the tomatoes.
I know.
So I know. So for instance, cooked tomatoes have higher lycopene content in them than raw tomatoes. Now, if you've got a prostate issue, then best case scenario is to have your tomato sauce and your slightly cooked tomatoes to release that. But really, at the end of the day, not to get too hung up on perfection and trying to get it all right, just eat the tomatoes in different forms, in different ways, and get them into you, because you're always going to benefit from the fiber. You're going to benefit from all the other, like I said, antioxidants and superfood ingredients that are in foods that don't even have a name yet. So don't get too hung up on all of that.
What about Clamato? I don't know. Clamato juice versus tomato juice?
Yeah. See, as soon as you get into those juice kind of things, you got to read the sodium level, and then that just makes me put it back on the shelf again.
I forgot you got that salting happening.
Yeah. That's definitely not a superfood.
What about eggs? Are they good or bad for you? Because we've gone through this roller coaster of emotions with eggs over the years, where it's like, oh, you can't, no, eat as many as you want. Oh, just eat a couple times a week.
No, you can eat as many eggs as you want. The actual original study that came out saying that eggs increase your cholesterol came from a study where they used powdered egg. It wasn't actually even the natural egg. And also, we go into this in the men's health episode and other episodes as well on heart health, and pretty much any episode really, is that your body, men and women, we need cholesterol. So anyone who has higher cholesterol and who's on medication, you also have to look at the collateral damage on something like that, because cholesterol is what transports all your hormones, including your testosterone, gents, around your body. So is your cholesterol high because you're eating 12 eggs a day? Yeah, at that point, you might have an impact, but is it from having 1 egg or 3 eggs a week or 1 egg a day or whatever that looks like? Then no, that's really not the issue. There's a bigger situation going on here, namely sugar could be number one. How is your liver dealing with things? How are your gut bugs and how's your gut microbiome? And really, as one of my esteemed guests always says, all roads lead back to the liver. So there are a lot more things going on than eating too many eggs when it comes to cholesterol. Please don't think that it's just down to the eggs and the shrimp and any other slightly higher cholesterol foods.
Right. Here's one of the things that confuses me again about eggs is the fact that you'll see some people and they insist only egg whites, and yet other people will tell you that the healthiest part of the egg, the most nutritious part, is the runny yellow yolk.
It is.
Well, then which one is it?
B vitamins are. That's where the fat. It's all perfect. It's all a perfect food. An egg is a perfect food from a protein standpoint, which you typically find more in the white. But the fat, we need fats in our body. If you want to have soft skin, if you don't want to look like you're 90 when you're really only 60, then eat the fats, because that's what every single cell in your body needs. And if you want to feel good, if you want to have energy, if you want sex drive, all those things, then you've got to have the fats and the cholesterol in order to transport all those hormones around the body. Is
there a superfood out there that is highly regarded that you have your doubts about? I know some people were a little questioning avocados at one point.
Yeah, I mean, avocados, people get their knickers in a knot about high-fat foods. So they think, no, don't eat too many fats. Well, no, don't eat too many deep-fried potatoes, for instance. That's the saturated fat that's not so great. And when it's heated to high temperatures, and it tends to get burnt. All the natural fats that are in avocados are absolutely incredible. So what you could do is you could get a lovely sourdough, whole grain piece of bread or toast, smash that avocado on top, put some salmon on there as well if you want, and top it off with an egg, put some greens on the side, a few seeds on top of it, and hey presto, I would call that a superfood plate right there.
Excellent stuff. Lianne Phillipson, you can check her out by going online and checking out her website, and you're available on virtually every platform, social media platform known to mankind, I believe.
Pretty much. So you can look for sproutright.com. You'll find lots of information there. And then also on LiannePhillipson.com, you'll find all of the podcast episodes and a lot of the show notes, which give you a lot of information and links onto more information, including my own supplement line called Take This with Lianne. And I actually have a superfood powder called Kid Boost for anyone out there that wants to feel like they were when they were a kid.
Oh. Well, I act like a kid, so that's probably a good fit for me.
There you go.
Lianne Phillipson, thank you very much. Always a pleasure, my friend.
My pleasure.
All right, take care. Coming up next, the son of a Southern chef.
More of the Ted Wallisham podcast after this.
Hey, let me take a moment to tell you about my friends at Helenda's. They are the meat people. You know, I've been a fan of their products for years now, and without a doubt, they make some of the best sausage in Ontario. They are multiple award winners, having captured the Ontario's Finest Meat Competition's coveted Award of Excellence on 3 occasions, in addition to dozens of individual product awards. Helenda's has also received the Grand Champion ribbon at the past 2 Royal Winter Fair's ready-to-eat meat snack competitions. So whether you're preparing a charcuterie board or a full-blown sit-down dinner for your friends or family, you'll find Helenda's award-winning products at fine meat shops throughout the province, now including selected Metro, Sobeys, Fortino's, and Foodland stores, along with their 7 Helenda's locations. Their barbecued kielbasa is my favorite. On a fresh bun with horseradish, it is out of this world. But don't just take my word for it. Judge for yourself. On your barbecue, in your kitchen, or straight from the refrigerator. Helenda's, the way sausage should taste. Okay, here we go down to visit our friend Tom Mahalik at Tom's Place, 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market in Toronto. Tom, of course, has the best selection of suits in the city of Toronto. But now that the winter is upon us, Tom, you need to put something on top of that beautiful suit when you go outside, and you've got some great coats.
We have some great coats that are 50 off. I just like to tell you guys a little story. I was going to switch the car at night, but then I changed my mind. I leave early in the morning, and I said to my wife, don't worry, darling, I will move the cars. Well, I went and I moved the cars. Took me about an hour. I had my sport jacket on, my beautiful sweater, and my scarf. But it wasn't enough. I was freezing. So in between trying to move the cars, I said, I got to go back to the house and grab one of those coats, one of those fabulous Tom's Place coats that are 50% off. Huge selection of coats that are 50% off, and they're only $249. I grabbed one of those coats. I put it on. I went back to the car. I didn't know how to reverse it. It took me another half an hour. But it was fine because I had my coat, I had my sweater, I had my scarf, I had my beautiful sport jacket, and a warm pair of pants. So it didn't bother me. So my wife asked me in the morning, Tom, what took you so long? Well, I said, I didn't know how to reverse it. I'll never do it again. I will listen to my wife, and I will switch while she's still there.
Tom's Place. Drop by. Coats, suits, jackets, sweaters, everything you need for the cold weather. 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market.
Now back to Ted and his guest.
Lazarus Lynch is the son and author of A Southern Chef. His young career is a fascinating and inspiring adventure. Chef Lynch, a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Ted. I'm excited to be here.
I got to tell you, though, I've been reading your book, going through your book, Son of a Southern Chef, for the last 3 nights, and the photography is remarkable, and the recipes are. I'm very excited to try a lot of them, and when I say try, I mean try, because I don't know how many I'm actually going to be able to accomplish. But it's a terrific book, and it's very entertaining, if I can put it to you that way as well. It sounds like it's a lot of fun.
You know, I really appreciate that. I feel I have a job, and you probably feel this way too, Ted, about your job, but you just really get to do cool things and talk to cool people. And so I feel the same way about creating the cookbook. It really was about bringing together my friends, my family. Many of them are artists and creatives like me. But we really just wanted to have a good time. And I wanted to create a book that felt like you were there, right? Like it felt like you were with us in that moment of creating it. And so I'm really glad that we accomplished that.
This is a real tribute to your family, and specifically when you talk of son of a Southern chef, the Southern chef that you refer to is your late dad. But your mom comes into play here, as do your grandparents, and generations of recipes and fond memories are passed along through this book.
Absolutely. You know, what's really interesting about food is that it really does connect us back to the past. And if we pay attention, it can really tell us a lot about where we're going. And what I mean by that is that I think the world is so, consumed right now with social media and consumed by everyday things that are happening. But when you pay attention to the stories that come with recipes, the folks who were the curators or the custodians of passing down these traditions, you realize how much has stayed the same. And so one of the things that I explored through the book was how much of me I'm still learning, how much about my ancestors, my family, I continue to learn about, which fascinates me, but also how much about food has remained the same and how many of those traditions are what is carrying forth legacy today. So it's really, really cool.
And your dad was from Alabama, right? He's the southern
Yes.
in the family, because you're New York City born and raised, right?
I think I start the book by saying, something like, I'm not from the South, something like that. Like very like, let's just clear the air right up front. But truth is, my dad was from Bessemer, Alabama, which was about 12 miles southwest of Birmingham. And he grew up there with his 4 brothers and sisters. He was raised by a single mom, my grandma, Margaret Lynch, who apparently was an amazing chef. And I say apparently because I never tasted her food. I never met her. She passed away before I was born. But my father watched her make sweet rolls. He would always talk about her cooking. And when he finally moved to New York City as a child and grew up there, he then met my mother. My mother was raised in Guyana in a convent. So she was raised by nuns until she was 13 years old. And then she was sent to London to live with her father. And she stayed in London until she was 26 and then decided it was just too cold and the weather was too gray for her. So she moved to New York just like that and met my dad. They were neighbors. They fell in love. They had me and my 4 brothers and sisters. But my dad sort of always was the chef. He had several businesses growing up. He was he installed carpet. He did men's retail. He did sort of variety store types of things, selling paintings and household goods. But he always loved to cook. And mom wasn't a great cook, but she loved to help my dad in any way she could. So oftentimes at the business, it would be mom and dad, just the two of them. So I really, mom and pop shops are very close to my heart. And so just growing up watching my dad cook and share all these recipes that he learned from Alabama and that he learned through his mom and his aunts and uncles, I was just really fascinated. I said this recently to someone and I said, I should write an article about this. You want to know what I would call it, Ted? How culinary school taught me to hate soul food. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Why would I say that?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't until I took the time to sit with my father. I actually sat with him and I interviewed him effectively. And I wrote down what he told me. I asked him about his life. I asked him about his family, just things I didn't know that I needed to know. And what I learned was that there was such a rich history to his life, but also such a rich history to soul food. But in culinary school, in my formal education as a chef, because I did go to culinary school, soul food was really never talked about. And I thought it was really interesting. What was talked about was French cuisine, Italian cuisine, and American cuisine. But nowhere in that was soul food really discussed. In fact, soul food was not looked at as a sort of mainstream cuisine. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it was really interesting how through learning about my father and about my story and culture, how I was able to sort of renew my love for the cuisine and understand that there are techniques, there are procedures, there are recipes that are complicated, just as in any other cuisine, that are worthy of being at the forefront of culture and culinary education. So I thought it was really interesting.
How would you define soul food?
Soul food is the food that was created by Southern Blacks. So it's different from Southern cuisine. Southern cuisine is sort of a larger umbrella term of food that is of the South in the United States. But soul food specifically was created by the Africans from different parts of the Africas who were brought over during the slave trade. And they would carry okra and rice seeds in their hair because it was really the only thing that could connect them back to home. And so this food was sort of generations upon generations of foods that were, or ingredients that were introduced from the Africas and also from the Caribbeans that were turned into what we now know as soul food. Soul food was also, ironically, influenced by French. So, when we look at even Creole or, Louisiana, or we think about people like Hercules, who was a chef for Thomas Jefferson, who was sent abroad to study in France, and who brought over techniques such as creating cheese sauces, and now we have macaroni and cheese. So we do see how colonization has impacted soul food and what we understand soul food to be today.
You went to school not far from where I'm doing this program. I'm just to the west of Toronto, about an hour and a half from here. You went to Buffalo State College, but you didn't go to study the culinary arts, though.
That's true. I did not go to study culinary arts. I graduated from a high school called Food and Finance High School in Manhattan, New York, where I spent 4 years effectively learning how to cook and bake and do pastry. And so when it was time to go to college, I really wanted to do something that pushed me out of my comfort zone. And so I decided to go to Buffalo State. It was really cold, but I loved it. It still is. Yeah. And, one of the things that I was interested in was I wanted to understand culture and people. I wanted to travel and study abroad. And that's what I did. My freshman year of college, I went abroad, studied in Rwanda for 2 weeks with the theater program. It was with a program called the Anne Frank Project. And we were in little small villages. We went to visit camps and just families, and we performed for them, and we ate their food, and we learned their language. We went to a women's prison and listened to the stories of the inmates. We learned about the genocide that happened in 1994 between the Hutus and the Tutsis. And so that was what I wanted to do after high school. I really wanted to learn about the world. I also studied abroad in China. I lived in Beijing for 3 months, and I was studying at the Department of Agriculture for Agricultural Sciences in China, and learned a lot about where our food comes from, how science influences the impact of growing food and producing fresh food. So, I really think that as a chef, which is, I guess I think of myself less and less these days as a chef. I think of myself more as a storyteller and as a writer and as a thinker and as an artist. But as a chef, we really do have a responsibility to pay attention to the world that we live in. We have a responsibility to pay attention to even politics, as sort of taboo as that subject might be at times, because this does impact food. It's all related.
I find it really interesting because your father owned a restaurant. I guess you were about 10 years old when your parents opened up Baby Sister's Soul Food in New York. And he not only was a chef and a restaurateur, but he was also a musician. He played with the bass and the saxophone and sang as well on a stage that he physically constructed in his restaurant. So he really built his own career, much the same way you did when you got to Buffalo in 2014. You created Son of a Southern Chef. You gathered a bunch of your friends in the dorm and said, okay, we're going to do these cooking videos and put them on YouTube. You decided to build your own future.
You're right. You really did your research. That's true. And it's always fascinating when I hear that. I think I wrote this in the intro of the book as well, that my father sort of built his career from scratch the same way his mother sort of made cakes from scratch. I mean, it was sort of the same idea, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And, we have this, what we call today a career. It's interesting. I didn't really think that I was creating something that the world needed when I created Son of a Southern Chef. I was doing that because it was helping me to understand who I was. And I think within every person, there is this search for identity. There's this search to understand who you are. And so really, I think I was in an exploration of self when I created it, or when I just decided to brand my name as the Son of a Southern Chef, which is really who I am. And so by doing that, I think that it created this awareness for others to think about their stories, think about their identity, think about who they are, who they want to be in the world. And I really am grateful that we live in a world where, you really can create your own reality. And that's what I did. And I'm so glad it worked out.
So you started to do these videos, and suddenly they caught on, and you were approached to do some more online stuff, which eventually led to some television performances. And you were victorious on Chopped a couple of times. You've been on the Today Show, and now you got this great cookbook that you've just released, but yet you don't own a restaurant. Do you have any plans on being a restaurateur?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think that it's funny. We have so many restaurants in the world, and growing up with a mom and dad who owned a restaurant, it is no glamorous life, and not that it has to be glamorous for me to say yes to it, but it's not something that I really wanted. I think I wanted it early in my career. And now I've just sort of gotten to a place where I think about impact. And so I don't want to just create more stuff. I want to create impact. And so what does impact look like in, communities of color where people are hungry and can't find their next meal? What does impact look like for young Black kids growing up in inner cities like I did? So those are the things that I'm thinking about. And as I continue to scale my career, I want to do things that create impact.
Speaking to the author of Son of a Southern Chef, Cook with Soul, Lazarus Lynch is my guest in studio. I'm just going to take a look at a couple of the recipes, and which actually show you the kind of connection that I'm talking about, the familiar connection which runs through not only your life, but in this book as well. There's one recipe here, Mom's split pea and ham soup with green plantain chips.
Yum. Yes.
One of your favorites.
I love that. It's funny, when I thought to put that recipe in the book, I sort of got some raised eyebrows from some people who were working with me. Like, are you sure you want to put that? It's not popular. It's not pretty. It's not exquisite, although it could be made that way. We could make it really beautiful on a plate, but it's really heart and soul comfort food. And that was a dish that my mom made over the holidays. And it just really reminds me of her. And I love it.
And then you've got one here that's Shorty's short ribs with Dad's creamy coleslaw and house pickles.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm a short rib guy. I love short ribs. And I also love coleslaw. So it made perfect sense to me to put that on a slider. My dad made amazing coleslaw. He learned the recipe from his mother, my grandmother, who learned from her mother, and so forth. And so what's really fascinating about the coleslaw was that I had to watch my dad about 10 times make the coleslaw, because each time he kept sort of doing something different. And, I had to explain to him, I said, Dad, with recipes, you kind of have to do the same thing over and over to get the same result. And he didn't truly agree with that. So each time he did something a little different, but it was always special and it was always great.
It was your dad who, in fact, you did all these interviews back when you were at Buffalo State University while you were doing these videos for YouTube, and you spent an awful lot of time interviewing your dad and relatives and gathering recipes from generations in past in which you used to formulate this book, and how you talk about how your dad said that Lazarus should be looking to the future to continue what I'm doing, but on a greater level, which is exactly what you've gone and done.
I think so. I think it was really prophetic at the time, so it gives me goosebumps to even hear you say that. I remember him saying that to me and recording that, and not really knowing what he thought that meant, but in my heart deeply knowing, I think I know what that means. I think that means for me to continue to tell the story, to continue to go that extra mile and own, who I am, and really celebrate that and celebrate my family. So he really did give that as a departing gift before he passed away. He gave that to me. And I think, I still think about that to this day.
I'm just going to read a couple of quotes here from the book. Food is the center of how I define family, culture, heritage, and the future. Every recipe that has been passed down from my grandmother to my father and now to me is alive, full of story, and rich in essence. When I cook for others, I get to share this legacy. That says an awful lot about your proximity to your family and what it means in terms of your thoughts toward the future.
Absolutely. And our proximity to the people that are around us, to the farmers, to the people who grow our food, to the people that we really don't pay attention to quite often. And so I think when we think about all the people that it takes to create food and share food, and even just a simple carrot that we might find at a grocery store or at a farmer's market, it really is the fingerprints of generations upon generations of folks who've made this possible. So there's also a lot of gratitude that happens when you think about food that way.
One of the things that I really love about this book, as I mentioned at the outset, Lazarus, is the fact that it's so familial, it's so family oriented. You talk about your love for the food that comes from your family, and another quote here: "I'm so grateful to honor his legacy, your dad's legacy in a global way, and reach an entirely new generation with soul food, son of a Southern chef. In the beginning of the work, it's the beginning of the work I believe I'm here to do. My father never strived to be perfect in the kitchen, only to make good food, and that's my goal for every reader of this book." That's very humble.
Wow, I think I was probably 23 when I wrote that. And I haven't heard those words in a really long time, but it's a reminder. I think it's a reminder for me about why I started doing what I was doing and how to keep going. I think one of the things my dad also passed, and my mom too, who passed down to me, was this endurance, this ability to persevere and to keep our eyes on the prize. And so thank you for reminding me of that. And I think, yes, that is true. That is my goal, that every reader of the book would just cook from their heart and enjoy it.
There's a lot to enjoy here. And just before I let you go, I got to leave one recipe in the minds of the folks here, which I guess is kind of a tribute to the time that you spent in Western New York. Buffalo chicken blue lollipops. And you talk about how of all the places I've ever lived and the foods I've tasted, I went to college in Buffalo, home to the Anchor Bar and Duff's famous wings. I must admit, I was not a huge buffalo wing sauce person before moving to Buffalo, but now I'm a fan.
This is true. I love this recipe, and I would also go to the Buffalo Wing Festival in Buffalo, New York. I think it would happen in the fall, and I would take a friend, and there was just wings galore everywhere. I'm now a Buffalo wing lover, but that's also one of my favorite recipes from the book. It's a great party, for parties, and I know with COVID we're not really doing that, but it's a great appetizer, hors d'oeuvre, really, really good.
There's a lot of great recipes in here, a lot of fun events. There's some serious recipes as well for people who consider themselves to be foodies or, serious cooks. And yet there's a lot here for people who are just like to have fun in the kitchen, but don't take it that seriously. It's extremely well illustrated. It's a great story about a great family that you should be very proud of the work that your dad did and the way he's raised you. And I think he'd be very proud of what you've accomplished.
Well, thank you, Ted, and thanks for having me, and thank you for sharing this with your audience.
It's been my pleasure, and I wish you nothing but the best. All the best to you. Take care.
Thank you, Ted. Take care.
The book is called Son of a Southern Chef, Cook with Soul. Lazarus Lynch is the author.
The Ted Wallacham podcast has been brought to you by Halenda's, the Meat People. Enjoy their award-winning products at selected Metro, Sobeys, Fortino's, and Foodland locations. Halenda's, the way sausage should taste. And Tom's Place. For the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices, it's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. The Ted Wallacham podcast is produced by Joey Roselli. Technical production by Paul Gatt. Music by Bike Thieves. I'm Becky Coles. Submit your questions and comments to ted@twmedia.ca.